Well, what better way to enjoy the holiday season than with my guest, Dillan Holliday?
Thank you, my friend. My first interview as a 25-year-old man.
That's right. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Made it to a quarter of a century.
Whew. Yeah, I guess so. Weldon's rooting for me to go at least a quarter more, so we're gonna try.
I think you can make it as long as you don't get on any planes.
Yeah, exactly, man. We always talk about planes, but
I know.
Everybody got to stay off the planes.
Well, what's been going on in your world? Go ahead and plug and promote up top.
Oh, fantastic, man. Well, first and foremost, right, we're doing good stuff on TikTok. Dillan Holliday, that's Dillan, and then you can see Holiday there. Weldon put out a YouTube channel, so I would love for y'all to check that out. He has some great videos. Conway Twitty in Space is a video over there, so please go check that out. And that's all I have to plug.
That's awesome. And I will plug something for you. For anyone that is really into country music, go on TikTok, follow Dillan Holliday, and then go into your messages or whatever they are, updates. And whenever you see the red line around Holiday, click on it and check out the radio show because it's booming right now.
Yeah, we do some live stuff over there where we play some songs and we try to do requests. And I appreciate that a lot, Taylor. Thank you.
Now, I wish I would hear a little bit more of the band when I come on there sometimes.
It's hard. I heard pre us going on, you were playing Atlantic City,
Atlantic City
tune. Bruce Springsteen wrote that. Fun fact.
I know.
I'm sure
it's one of the greatest covers of all time.
Yeah, well, it is. So the whole thing with the band is they're a hard group to place, right? Because are they country? It's like Leonard Skinner. Some people consider them country. Some people consider them Southern rock. Like I would consider that country, but some people don't. It's all in where you place people. The band has a great version of Long Black Veil.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar?
Yes.
Oh man, it's a beautiful, one of my absolute favorite versions.
And why is that?
It's just so like raw and authentic. And the most famous song from the band is probably The Wait, And when you look at that song and you look at sort of the story behind it, right? The Wait, Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot were both written about the same woman, right?
Oh, really?
Yes. There's a lady named Cathy Smith, Canadian woman who was in the entertainment industry sort of as like a famous muse, but also had some legit gravity in the music world. Gordon Lightfoot dated her. She's out on the town. And he's thinking, man, where is this woman? So he writes Sundown, right? She's also the woman that was with John Belushi when he died. She's the one who injected him with the stuff. Crazy part of that is, right, Robin Williams was there that night.
Whoa.
So he leaves because his whole thing is this lady, she's scum. That's what he referred to her as. Now, she took the guilt for that. She took the guilt for, John dying. But you go and you listen to the song Sundown and you're thinking, man, this is a beautiful love song.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look into that story and it like takes a little bit away from you, because it's rough.
How did Cathy Smith end up with all these people? What was her story?
So, like I said, sort of a muse, but also like a pretty high profile drug dealer. So like when she met John, for example, she was with the band as they appeared on SNL. So she met John through that. And basically, like, she's this famous groupie drug pusher, but she also worked with musicians. Like, she worked with Hoyt Axton. She had a writing credit with Hoyt. I couldn't tell you the song.
Whoa.
But yeah, she did a lot of things. And some of them bad, some of them great. I mean, she was an influence, though. That's the crazy thing, is she was an influence. To influence two of the greatest songs of all time, I mean, you must be special.
Well, did she get in trouble with the authorities for injecting Belushi?
Yeah, I think there was like a whole deal, but she, and I don't know what came of that, to be completely honest with you, but I know that she did like she manned it, right? That she was the problem, that she did it. Because it was something like, the heroin and cocaine deal when they mix it together or whatever and like shoot you up with it. She basically hit him 11 times. That's what he wanted.
Oh, he was speedballing.
Yeah, speedball. That's it.
Yeah.
And 11.
Whoa.
And so she manned it. She also like was carrying a child at some point, which the band referred to as the band baby because they did not know whose child it was. Yeah. So there's a lot of craziness to this whole deal.
Well, when you say she cared, did she have the baby?
I could not tell you.
So
it's one of those things that I have no, I try not to dig too much into the personal lives and the families because that seems unfair to me.
Whoa. Can you imagine being a kid and someone asks you who your dad is and you just show them an album of the band and you're like, pick one.
Yeah, really. But, that kind of thing happens way more often than you would think. Right now, there's a lot of videos about Jesse Presley. Or have you seen anything about this?
No.
Okay, crazy story, right? So there's a guy in like a mental health place, right? And he tells the world he's Elvis Presley. So finally people are like, all right, we're going to test this guy's DNA against Elvis's. Perfect DNA match. They're like, that's weird. We're going to test this guy's DNA to Elvis's parents. Perfect DNA match. So people now are leading to think, Jesse had a twin who was stillborn, who they did name Jesse. People are thinking maybe Jesse wasn't stillborn, maybe because the Presleys weren't well off, maybe they gave him away. And maybe Jesse, who's now in this mental health facility, isn't crazy, he's really Elvis. Or at least Elvis related.
How old is he?
Old. He's an old man. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the exact details, but he's an old guy now. So,
potentially Elvis's brother?
That's the rumor and innuendo.
Huh.
Isn't that crazy? The story has been forever. The story has been that Elvis's twin died. I mean, there are some people that are saying that this isn't even Elvis's twin, that this is Elvis. And I guess there's something with the family, and you would know more about this because you're a big Elvis guy. There's something with the family where they said they would release more details in 2027 about the death of Elvis.
Why 2027?
No idea. I mean, I would assume it has something to do with Elvis's death date, but I have no idea.
So why is this person going viral?
People have always been telling this story. This isn't a new story, but it's been going viral because it's getting a lot of traction now. It's sort of like Bob Joyce, the Reverend who says that he's Elvis.
Yes, I've seen that guy.
All these people that claim that they're Elvis, it always makes big news, but for some reason the algorithm is a real big fan of Jesse's story right now.
Huh. I thought this was going to be like a musician who was going viral.
No. He's just, like I said, a guy who's in some sort of institution who claims he's Elvis, and when they tested his DNA, he's a match to Elvis. He's a match to both of Elvis's parents. How crazy is that, Taylor?
That's insane. We do have some Elvis fans that watch the podcast, so if y'all know anything about this, please comment. I want to hear more about this.
For sure.
Do you know, so the thing that's crazy about Elvis is like with all the impersonators, do you know what I did in college?
If you tell me you impersonated Elvis, I'm going to laugh.
I did not, but I did do something regarding an impersonator. I had a project that I had to do. So this blonde-headed girl in the room, the pop culture, it was a pop culture class. And the professor said, I want one person to do a paper on Marilyn Monroe and one person to do a paper on Elvis Presley. I'm only giving this to two people. So obviously I threw my hand up and said, I'll do Elvis. And this girl got Marilyn, and it was just for bonus credit. I started to sit down. It was supposed to be like 2 pages. I was like, I cannot write a paper about Elvis in 2 pages. It is impossible. So I called an impersonator in Birmingham, Alabama. And I said, hey, I need you to come to this classroom on this day when I'm supposed to be giving my presentation. And he came dressed as Elvis, and I just did an interview with him. the girl had done Marilyn before me, so she just gets up and everybody's falling asleep, and it's 2 pages of her just reading about Marilyn. And then all of a sudden I get up and I'm like, do y'all want to know how big Elvis was? This is how big Elvis was. Elvis died in 1977, and this is the year 2001. And this guy comes walking in. It was like the most beautiful scene. He comes walking in. Everybody's like, what the hell is this? But I literally just sat there and interviewed him for like 30 minutes and then said, that's how big Elvis was when he left.
Wow. Well, I mean, obviously you have a love of interviewing. So does your love of interviewing, was that like the first interview you ever conducted, or were you always interested in journalistic arts?
Okay, so I don't love interviewing and I have no media training. I just like talking to people. I like the connection I feel with people when I talk to them and get to learn about them. So it's more like that. But if I'm a good interviewer, I appreciate it. I just don't feel like I am.
Well, yeah, but having those conversations, I mean, that is journalism, even if you do nothing with it.
Right.
It is journalism, which is something that I learned, like, you know, back when I was working in the smoke shop. Like, you can sit down and talk to someone, and it's basically an interview, an everyday transaction. You just don't do anything with it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I told someone recently comparison is the thief of joy. So whenever like I make a reel, I always see other reels. I'm like, man, that's way better. Or I hear someone else do an interview and I'm like, man, that person is so good. So I just try to pick up little tips and tricks from people.
Yeah, it can be hard when you're, you know, in the social media world, you know, rather you're an influencer or content creator, whatever we're supposed to
God, please don't
say.
use that word.
I know. I'm with you.
I hate that word, influencer.
It's such an odd phrase. And I know why, you know, originally they used that phrase because they thought they were going to be able to sell products. And then all these people got endorsements and products moved like turtles. It was terrible. But it's hard not to look at other people's content and compare and contrast what you're doing versus what they're doing. And like myself and Weldon are great friends, and we've talked about it a million times. In any other world, we would hate each other. And I mean, we work with each other to the extent that, like, just today, I filmed a video I'm going to upload when we're done with this. I sent it to Weldon. I said, what'd you think? And he says, man, great editing. You're crazy for this one.
Well, I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Your content's really getting great, man. I've really been enjoying it.
That's a credit to Weldon. He has been so helpful in showing me what I need to do as far as attention grabbing, as far as utilizing what I have at my, you know, at my fingertips. I mean, just the other day I did one about Mickey Newberry. And by the way, I want to say this too, just because it's funny. Weldon told me not to do that video. He told me, he said, no one's going to know who Mickey Newberry is. And I said, but what if that's how I grab their attention? And he said, man, good luck. And I did it. I posted it. Roger Murrah sees it, which made my whole day. You have no idea how much that meant to me. Getting your text at 1 something in the morning. Hey man, Roger Murrah reposted your video.
There we go.
It was just a video where all I said was, this is one of country music's most important, you know, outlaws, troubadours, whatever. And most of y'all don't even know his name. And that's Mickey Newberry, who wrote hits for everybody.
Yeah. I think it's important when you're calling out people that other people might not know about. It's still a very valuable thing. Just tell people, hey, you might not know this person. If you don't, no worries, but I recommend checking them out.
And that's exactly how it was, right? The video wasn't like a punch down or anything.
Right.
It was exactly, it was poking at the people who should know better, not poking at the people who just need to learn.
Well, listen, man, content creators right now are becoming so valuable to me. It was an unexpected surprise when I started this to kind of connect with Dylan Weldon, you, Cody Tucker, Nikki in Nashville. These are people, I used to hear the words content creator before I was on Instagram, and I'm like, oh, what is that? It's so valuable. The number of things that you guys educate me on, like, makes me feel more informed and gives me a better understanding. And it allows me kind of a segue into learn more about that person if I haven't heard or haven't heard more about a story and I want to learn more about the story. You know, there's one you did recently. You did Friends in Low Places. Have you ever, so there was a second part to it, and I want to know if you knew about, did you know Earl Bud Lee sold his publishing rights to that song?
No.
Okay, so the second part of that story is that Earl Bud Lee had a bar tab for $1,400, and I think Garth was about to release it. He couldn't pay it, and he raised the money to pay the bar tab by selling his publishing rights. Now, he still had his writer's share, but he sold the publishing rights for $1,400 and does not own them to this day.
Wow, no, I didn't know that part of the story. But I mean, it's fitting with the other part of the story being that it was because he couldn't pay for,
Right?
he couldn't pay for the bar tab then. That story was one that I had heard, but I had never looked into because that's just not my era. I try to stick to my, perspective era. And I knew I wanted to do something about the 90s, and I thought, man, what a better person to talk about than Garth. People love Garth.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this video was going to do so well, and it did not. It bombed so bad where I was like, dude, I'm never going to do this again. It was such a bomb.
And that's the Friends in Low Places one?
Yeah.
Well, man, it's the biggest song ever. So it's one of the biggest songs ever in country music because it kind of launched his career and bring in a lot of people to country. I'm kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, we were too, because like I said, there's been a lot of me discussing things with like Weldon ahead of time before doing stuff. And like, there's really only been like 10 videos under the new brand umbrella for me. And most of them have done, because I went from doing 800 people, to 6,000, which is a huge deal. Because a year ago on TikTok, I was doing 25 and 30,000, and then TikTok changed. Then I was doing like 300, 800, and Weldon was still hitting good numbers. So we looked at it and we assessed our situation, and now generally doing right around 10K. Which for me is fantastic, by the way.
Now, do we have an update on the TikTok situation?
Yeah. So the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the plea. They're not giving TikTok more time, right? So there isn't going to be a buffer of time. If they reach the 19th of January, TikTok's going away. But I saw a video last night too where Trump said that he's going to save TikTok because he learned about billions of people that watched him on TikTok, and TikTok could have won him the election, and TikTok is huge, and we're going to save TikTok is what he says. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I hope he does, because again, the content creators that I've met on this journey, I don't know what percentage of their revenue comes down to TikTok, but if it's a significant source of their revenue, it's just such a great opportunity for people to find their lane and do something independent.
Knowing so many individuals, I know some people who make a lot of money. I know some people, like in my situation, I make hot dog money, and that means I make enough money that at the at the 15th of every month I can go buy a hot dog. There's some people that make steak money. Some people are making mansion money.
Mm-hmm.
It's all over. I mean, it's just, you're right, though. This is a lot of people's livelihood. It's what's keeping a lot of people alive, and for it to just go away. I mean, look, there's the working class answer where it's like, oh, man, see you at the water cooler on Thursday. You got to go back to swinging a hammer. And it's like, well, yeah, people that are working class give this whole thing a hard time because they do. They work really hard. Right? But at the end of the day, if those people worked themselves into a position where they didn't have to go work a 9 to 5 for someone else that's yelling at them all day, they wouldn't. They would do what these guys do and sit home and film a video every day and make $1 billion off of it.
Well, look, like I'll just reference Dylan Weldon and Cody Tucker. One of the things I love about what you guys are doing in the content creation space is y'all get to do it independently. You don't have a team of publicists. You don't have managers that I know of. It's just something that's coming from your own creative spirit. And now look what happened to Haktua. She starts a podcast, she goes viral, and now she's in hiding because she hooked up with the wrong team and someone sold her on doing a coin.
Yeah.
I love that content creators that are doing it and building a following, a solid following, one person at a time, one follower at a time, have this opportunity to do it on their own.
Social media is politics. That's all it is.
You think?
Well, yes, every single one of us are politicians. We have to go out and we have to meet our crowd at their level. And sometimes your crowd is, like in our case, our crowd is an older crowd. They're the classic country music crowd. So those folks are folks who maybe aren't on this app as much as other audiences. It's a harder audience to tap.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But we're all politicians. We're all throwing babies and shaking hands, or whatever the phrase is. You don't
really think that's the saying, right?
Taylor, you can't let me have this. No. But I do think, complete seriousness, that social media is just politics. You're walking that thin line, trying to get. It's honest politics. Don't get me wrong. There's nobody endorsing me for $1 trillion, but I digress. We're meeting people at their level. We're meeting our audience one person at a time. And you're making that connection. And look, sometimes it's scary, right? Because you have people who, like, they think because they watch your TikTok videos that you're their friend. And that can be scary, because people show up to your job or, sometimes maybe even your house. And it's like, all right, man, let's not do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to take on the same position as like the famous artist.
Yeah, but well, the thing about, that too is I feel like I watched the most insane video yesterday where a lady, I guess Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce threw some sort of Christmas party or something. This lady goes, I feel as a Swiftie that Travis did a terrible job because I know Taylor in my heart. And it's like, you are an individual who has never met Taylor Swift. You listen to her songs, and you think that you know more about her than the man who's been with her for 2 years or whatever. Oh, that is a crazy person.
I learned about this recently. This is called a parasocial relationship.
Yeah. And you can't break it off. You can't break it off because it's one-sided, right? Taylor Swift doesn't know this lady exists, but in this lady's mind, Taylor Swift is her best friend.
Oh,
it's scary.
It's scary.
It's scary. And like, those of us that use our real names or, our likeness, some of these people hide behind AI creation, and maybe that's the way to do it, stay anonymous.
This is getting back to infatuation. Some of my favorite stories in music are infatuation. I think there was George Harrison and Eric Clapton were both in love with the same girl that inspired the song Layla.
Yeah, I think that's the story, but I'm not super familiar.
Wasn't Merle Haggard in love with Dolly?
Merle Haggard loved Dolly. He wrote 2 songs about Dolly. So a lot of people know about the one. Always Wanting You is a song that Merle Haggard wrote for Dolly Parton.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a funny story that goes along with it. So funny if you're Merle Haggard, probably horrifying if you're Dolly Parton. Merle Haggard writes this song. It's 4 a.m. He calls Dolly's house. A tired lady answers the phone, probably a housekeeper. And Merle Haggard, I need to talk to Dolly. And she's like, well, 1 second, please. And sends the phone, over to Dolly. Hello? This is Merle Haggard, and he sings the entire song. Always Wanting You. Dolly Parton is in bed next to her husband, Carl Dean. She has no interest in Merle Haggard, and here he's confessing his love in a song.
Brutal.
He had another song he wrote about her called I've Got a Yearning. To my knowledge, there isn't a cool story about that one. But Merle, even in the end of his life, like, he would talk about how beautiful Dolly was and how he really was in love with her for a long period of time. And Merle was someone who had a lot of marriages, some to musicians, some to regular people. But at the end of his, life, his final wife, Teresa, I believe was the true love of his life. And, They had a long relationship together and were very happy.
I think Dolly is one of the most important country artists of all time.
Without a doubt. Dolly's done what we were just talking about earlier, right? It's hard to reach an audience that you're not in tune with. Dolly can reach everybody. And I mean, she's had some help, don't get me wrong, right? Having a song like I Will Always Love You recorded by Whitney Houston, that's a huge deal. That tapped you into a group that you weren't already tapped into. Jolene being a classic, every 5 years there's a new version of Jolene, whether it be Beyonce or Miley Cyrus. Dolly has stayed on top of trends. She stayed on top of being viral. Dolly was viral before being viral was a thing.
Yeah, and her vision for going into acting and doing 9 to 5, she's really one of those pop culture icons who country music benefited from.
Oh, 100%. I mean, same thing with like Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
She was the star of a film second to Burt Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. Not taking anything away from Jane Fonda and who's the other woman in that film?
Golly, from Gracie and Frankie. I can't remember her name.
We're in trouble. We're in trouble. Anywho, y'all know what we're saying and what we're getting at here. It's one of those things where Dolly has managed to find herself constantly at the center of our culture.
And again, just a net positive for country music, because that's what she did for country, to bring a lot of people to country in the 80s when you realized that there are a lot of great personalities and great music. Didn't she write Jolene and I Will Always Love You on the same day?
That's the rumor. She didn't always say that that's how it happened, but as she's gotten older, she has stated that there were 3 or 4 songs she wrote in one writing session, and that those were 2 of them. And I mean, the only other person that has a story like that is Merle Travis, and I think we've talked about it in the past. Merle Travis, world-class guitarist, such a great writer, wrote 9 Pound Hammer, Dark as a Dungeon, and 16 Tons in one writing session, which is unreal to write multiple hits in one session.
Wow. By the way, shout out to Lily Tomlin. We apologize for forgetting your name. And she's one of my favorite characters from The West Wing also.
Did you ever see this is terrible for me to bring up. Did you ever see the clip of her going off on a director?
No.
Okay, she was doing a film with Dustin Hoffman in like the mid 2000s, and her and the director hated each other's guts. You have never heard a senior citizen say the C word as much as she did in this clip.
Oh, really?
It's unreal.
She sounds like my kind of fun.
I know, my kind of lady too. It's the most unreal clip. And Dustin Hoffman in one of these scenes is like, Lily, it's okay, like calm down. And she goes, fuck you too. And it's like, oh my God. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here. I apologize.
Curse as much as you want, brother.
But it's we love her. She's such an amazing actress. They all are. All 3 of those women, including Dolly, were amazing. And, Jane Fonda was married to Ted Turner.
Oh, yeah. She was at all the Braves games.
It's so... See, now you have me thinking about, like, the people who have done a lot for country music as far as diversifying country music, right? And in the modern era, I don't care what anybody says. You got to give credit to Post Malone. You got to give credit to Beyonce. I do not care what your opinion is of their music or them personally. You have to credit them. You have to credit Shaboozey and Jelly Roll, all the same. Back in the day, man, there's nobody more responsible for other people's careers than Johnny Cash.
Mm-hmm.
Gave the Statler brothers their start, gave Carl Perkins his second wind. Just so many names. And, Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, and Jerry Lee Lewis all worked together at Sun Records back in the day, and they all become superstars. All of them become superstars. And, Jerry Lee Lewis, because of his extracurriculars, doesn't get the credit that he deserves. Jerry Lee Lewis was probably, I'm going to upset some people here. Here's your clip, Taylor Swaid. Jerry Lee Lewis should have been, by all rights, the king of rock and roll. Had his extracurriculars not gotten in the way of that, he probably would have been. But then to take that, the world turned its back on him, rightfully so. He was losing out on so much money. These shows he was supposed to have booked at stadiums were canceled. And he goes back to playing bars. And in that time, he goes, well, all right, I'm going to leave rock and roll in my past. I'm going to country music. And he records several country music albums. And have you listened to much of his country music stuff?
I don't think so.
Taylor, Jerry Lee Lewis is the most believable country singer of all time. And listen, George Jones and Mel Street, man, I get it. Jerry Lee Lewis, notice I'm not going to say he's the greatest country singer. He's the greatest singer of country songs.
That's a bold statement.
It's the truth. If you listen to those songs, that man is all of it. He encompasses all of it. He encompasses honky tonk. He encompasses heartbreak. He is every subset culture of country music put into one. You want to talk outlaw? Jerry Lee Lewis is on the list. You want to talk troubadour? He's on the list. You want to talk about a guy that can sing a ballad? He's on the list. The only thing he couldn't do, because to my knowledge he never tried, is he couldn't be Marty Robbins. He didn't sing El Paso.
Is there anything to the idea that he came to country because he didn't get his due in rock?
I mean, my understanding of it was quite literally not that it's because he didn't get his due in rock. It was because when it came out that he had married a 13-year-old girl that simultaneously was his 13-year-old cousin, when that news broke over in England, it rippled throughout the world, and places didn't want to book him anymore. So those stadium shows were canceled immediately. He went to country music because he had no other place to go. He was playing bars.
God,
rock and roll wasn't going to take him.
What a bad look for country music that will accept it.
and that's just the truth.
Because I like Jerry Lee. I'm not knocking him, but it's like that just plays into a stereotype of country music.
And these days, we would never accept that. But at the time, for whatever reason, I think it's because, you know what? I don't think it was because they were okay with what he did. I think it was because Jerry Lee Lewis was a star. And at those days, you didn't have these folks crossing over the way you do now.
Right.
When Jerry Lee Lewis wanted to do country music, they didn't look at it and say, man, this is a guy that likes kids. They looked at it and said, this is a superstar. When Bobby Darin, at the end of his life, the last couple songs he was doing were country songs. One of the greatest clips of all time is Bobby Darin live singing Midnight Special. It's like 7 minutes long, and he's dancing and having a good time. Bobby Darin transitioned at the end of his career to country, and then he unfortunately would pass away.
Everyone comes to country. Listen, I celebrate it. I don't get the Beyonce thing because she said it's not a country album. I think that was a form of race baiting, but all the people that are having good success right now in country music, I'm happy for them.
You know, I think the thing about Beyonce is this. Beyonce transcends genre. So she can say it's not a country album. The country music fans are listening to it. The Beyonce fans are listening to it. And the pop fans are listening to it. Does it at that point constitute as a country album? I don't know.
Perhaps.
I mean, think about it like this, right? A great movie, Cadillac Records. Adrian Brody and Beyonce were in it. Beyonce played Etta James.
And Eddie Murphy?
Was he in there?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Wait, no, that's Dreamgirls.
Yeah, the different film.
Sorry,
different film.
My bad.
No, you're good. So Cadillac Records, great film. Adrian Brody's in it. Beyonce's in it. Beyonce plays Etta James. Because of that, she puts out an album. The album is full of, Etta James. She's playing Etta James. It's Etta James covers. If she would have said, well, this isn't a tribute to Etta James, she would have been wrong, but she also would have been right. Because people weren't listening to it for Etta James covers. They were listening to it because it's fucking Beyonce.
Mm-hmm. I like Beyonce. Don't get me wrong.
I see. No, and I know what you're saying. I
She
get
makes
your
fun music.
Yeah. Covers are one of those interesting things in music because sometimes you'll hear a cover and it reinvents the song for you.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Sometimes it's as simple as Johnny Cash doing Hurt or Rusty Cage. A little bit of Love for Soundgarden in there. Sometimes it's something more simple, like Dottie West singing the Eagles' Desperado, or Buck Owens singing Massachusetts by the Bee Gees, or Dolly and Kenny singing Islands in the Stream, which was a Bee Gees song. One of my absolute go-to songs right now is one that was written by two of your good friends. Roger Murrah and Jim McBride wrote a song called 10 Years, 3 Kids, and 2 Loves Too Late. It is the greatest country song of all time. This song is so good. Mel McDaniel had a cut of it, which the same album that he cut this on, he cut another song Murrah was a part of with Ronnie Dunn and like a bunch of other people. Hello Daddy, Good Morning Baby, which is another one I love because Mel McDaniel's great. 10 Years, 3 Kids, and 2 Loves Too Late has a version by Charlie Louvin, who is, country music royalty and bluegrass royalty to some extent. Everything about it is perfect. First off, it has an amazing intro. His version has an amazing intro. But then, the great thing about Charlie Louvin is you could hear the age and the hurt in his voice when he sang songs. So even when he was 30, he sounded 70. And so he's singing when he's young a song called See the Big Man Cry, and you could hear the emotion. 10 Years, 3 Kids, and 2 Loves Too Late. And you really believe the story that this guy's walking down the street, sees this girl he used to date and her kids, and he stops to talk to her. Your kids look just like you. Here's my son. Shows her a picture. And then you really believe the hurt in his body where he's like, I know that if I stoke this flame, I'm not returning home. 10 years, 3 kids, and 2 loves too late. It's an amazing song.
Well, two of my favorite subjects in the world are Roger Murrah and Jim McBride, and their lyrics, their writing, what they built for country music is undeniable.
For real. I mean, those guys kept storytelling alive.
That's right.
Storytelling could have died in the 80s. It could have died in the 90s, but guys like Jim McBride, Roger Murrah, Gary Gentry, Tom T. Hall, they kept it. They kept it alive. And that's something that, to me, I always appreciate the writers that valued storytelling over everything else. And it's been an honor to be able to meet and speak with some of these people, but it's also been an honor to, like we were talking about earlier, Roger shared one of my videos recently, which made my whole life, because he's such a sweet guy. I hear from all the folks who know him, you and Weldon, and he's a nice man.
Well, I'll tell you something, man. For the way I grew up and the way that I idolize these guys, when I get a text from Rafe Van Hoy saying, great podcast, I listened today, it was a good podcast, or Jim says, hey, I really enjoyed that, or they're just so supportive, that's another thing, that those men, they really appreciate what the Weldons and the Holidays and Country Drive podcasts are doing, because we celebrate their work. And it's just so much fun to get to know them, to know that behind those lyrics that have lifted us up and gave us comfort in bad moments, and to have them say they appreciate your work or my work, it's like, that's like a fist pump moment. Like I get a text from them and I'm like, yes. Because they have put so much value in my life. I wish more people embraced the songwriters, because they are the words that we grew up with.
Well, and they used to not get the credit. When you were a songwriter, back in the day when Johnny Cash recorded a song, people assumed he wrote it. Because, songwriters didn't get the credit. And now we're in a space where like we can go back and credit these songwriters, the ones that we can credit. I mean, look, there's a lot of songs that are written by prisoners and we'll never know. Because that was a thing back in the day. That was an honest play that used to happen.
Well, I will interrupt and say this. They did get the credit because you might not know this. You just turned 25. But when I was 10 years old and Alan Jackson had been out for 2 years, you could go to Don't Rock the Jukebox album and you could see that Jim McBride has written songs with Alan. You could see that Roger Murrah and Keith Stegall had written Don't Rock the Jukebox. So they had the liner notes like on the back of the album and they would credit the songwriter. So McBride and Murrah and Stegall were three names that I knew well, had no idea who they were. I just knew those were at least the name on the song.
Well, that's something that came later though. Because there was a period of time like on records where...
But I'm talking about 1989, 1990, 1991.
Yeah, at that point, you're right. There were notes. And if there was a music video, normally the writer would be credited.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Listen, Taylor Swaid, I'm not quite as useless as you think I am.
Oh, come on. Brother, no, I got 19 years on you. I just know, but this is part of this conversation. Yeah. The people nowadays that are young and enjoying music don't necessarily have the ability to see who wrote each song whenever it releases. They usually don't credit on YouTube. They don't credit on Spotify. So I have no idea. The only person I'm largely aware of as one of the greatest songwriters these days is Jesse Alexander. So I don't know a lot of other writers. Ernest, I know a lot of the stuff Ernest writes, but that's only because I dig into it.
Well, in modern country too, you have a lot of writers who write with like fake names, or like you have people who write that are business entities. It's very odd how it works, but like T-Pain. T-Pain's been open. He writes country songs. He just doesn't use T-Pain because he's afraid of what that entails.
Hey, what was the song that John Prine wrote that he didn't want to be credited on?
He helped write it. He didn't write it. David Allan Coe's "You Never Even Call Me by My Name." As David Allan Coe says, it's the perfect country and western song, is what they say. So Steve Goodman is the person who David Allan Coe in the song credits for writing it. The story is Steve Goodman and John Prine are in a motel room in Chicago, which is where their stomping grounds was. Maybe it wasn't Chicago. They're somewhere. They had met in Chicago. That was their stomping grounds. And David Allan Coe, has a sort of idea, and they have this idea, and they write it. Perfect country and western song. Somewhere down the line, it gets pitched to David Allan Coe. David Allan Coe sends it back, and that's where enter John Prine. They're in this hotel room. And that night, these two guys sat and wrote, edited the song and wrote the final verses, and yeah. But John Prine had said he didn't want credit for it.
But he's not listed in credit, but he is part of the co-write?
He's not listed in anything. The only reason we know that he was there is because John Goodman, before he died, had said that John Prine was there. And John Prine has since talked about it.
Okay.
But he's not, like, that's only through them that we know this to be true.
Is he a paid writer on it, but not credited?
No, he's nothing. He has nothing. Wow. Yeah. At least to my knowledge. It's interesting how that works sometimes. When we talked to myself, when I say we, I mean me and Dylan Weldon, we interviewed Bobby Braddock. And Braddock told us that back in the day, what would happen with songwriters is, let's say I'm Bobby Braddock and you're Jim Ed Brown. And you record my song. You automatically get a writing credit. You didn't do anything, but you get a writing credit because the studio wants it that way. Or because you have a contract that says that's how it's going to be. Anything you record, you get the credit, which includes the paid writing rights. Wow. Didn't do anything. It's crazy. The other part of that is where, guys like Bobby Braddock were in an opportunity to sort of work with younger people. And this is where I'm going to talk about your buddy, Rafe Van Hoy. I have heard something, Taylor Swaid, that blew my mind. when we did the podcast with Bobby Braddock, he told us that Billy Sherrill changed the lyrics to Golden Ring. It was one lyric and it was very subtle.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the one time he disagreed with Billy Sherrill. Billy Sherrill was a producer, for those of y'all who might not know, who produced George and Tammy. He's buried in George Jones's burial plot. That's how tight all these people are. Billy Sherrill, if he said something, it goes. Billy Sherrill was considered to be a music genius, and the way they describe it is that he heard things other people didn't. If there was a little issue, he could hear it, he would find it, and he would neutralize it. So he was a stickler. And the line in Golden Ring, written by Bobby Braddock and Rafe Van Hoy, was originally written as, I know you won't admit it. You won't admit it, but I know you're running around. And the line was turned into, I know you won't admit it, but I know you're leaving town. And the reason it was changed is because earlier he had used the same word, around. And Bobby Braddock talks to Billy Sherrill and he goes, sir, around and round are two different words. And Billy Sherrill said, it's the same word. You're using an apostrophe or whatever. And Bobby Braddock goes, that makes it a different word. And he goes, no. Having said that, that one subtle change turns the story from just the woman and the man not getting along and the woman leaving the man into a story where the original story being the woman's been walking out. She's been cheating on her husband, which changes the whole song. Rafe Van Hoy sang the original demo, which I was thankful enough to have it shared with me, and I was able to listen to it. And he sings the original lyrics. And myself and Bobby Braddock agree it's the best version of the song. Dylan Weldon believes George and Tammy's is the best version, but Dylan Weldon, it's okay to be wrong, you know?
Well, since I know Rafe, I'll just go ahead and say Rafe's is better.
Yeah, it really is. And my understanding is that Rafe was like 21, or maybe even younger.
Rafe was 21. Curly Putnam was in Lebanon, Tennessee. Could not drive in that day for whatever reason. I don't remember the exact reason. Bobby Braddock walks in, looks at Rafe, and says, Curly's not coming in today. You want to write this with me? And the 21-year-old Rafe Van Hoy becomes the co-writer of Golden Ring,
which would become a song immortalized forever.
Forever by two legends.
Boy, Taylor, I know it wasn't 90 seconds, but that was a good little thing there. I think
Rafe, by the way, Rafe is one of the greatest musicians, one of the funniest people. I can't wait to have him on again because I love that dude's spirit. He's just the funnest. He's just hilarious. If you ever go see him in a writer's night, he captures the room with his humor.
Yeah. I would love to talk to him. You know, we love talking to all those guys just because they have stories that it's like, you know, you could just throw a name out and those guys have a story.
Have a story. You know? My other thing about Jim McBride that I love is he'll do murder in a song, and I love murder in a good song.
It's as you know, it's my favorite subject. I'm one of those guys that likes the dark songs. We've talked about Psycho, you know, Long Black Veil, all those things. But I think people steer away from those songs, but it's crazy how many times, you know, life imitates art or art imitates life. You know, Johnny Cash was shooting at people. George Jones was shooting at people. Ernest Tubb was shooting at people. Thankfully, they were all drunken, drug-induced slobs and couldn't aim worth a damn. But if you would have caught them on a good day, they would have taken your eye.
That's right.
You know, my understanding is that back in the day, the big difference between country music now and country music back in the day is back in the day it was a brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of something that's been lost.
Yeah.
And when you talk about that brotherhood, like, there's certain people that's names are always going to be mentioned. You know, the Highwaymen, you know, Chris Christopherson, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, you know, Merle Haggard, of course, being thrown in as well. then you can break that down into little tribal groups like, Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings were super close, Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash were super close. Johnny Paycheck and George Jones were super close. Do you know who Don Rich is?
Don Rich. I was thinking about Charlie. No.
So Don Rich was Buck Owens' guitar player.
Okay.
And Buck described their relationship as being like, it was a brotherly relationship, it was a fatherly relationship, they were best friends, all of these sort of roles tied into one. The brotherhood is so important because when something happens to one, the other one never recovers. Don Rich passed away, unfortunately, young, back in the 70s in a motorcycle accident. And Buck Owens says the music was never the same for him, that he was broke forever. But there's one song, to me anyway, that's an exception. And that's the song Big in Vegas. Big in Vegas was written by Terry Stafford, I believe, and was originally titled Big in Dallas. And it's this story about this young musician who leaves home, who goes on, and his mother's begging him not to leave, but he says, I need to do this. And Buck Owens performed it as Big in Vegas. And it's the recording that, to me, it sounds like Don was still there. Even when Buck would do it long after, Don Rich was gone. It's the last song Buck Owens sang before he died. So, Buck Owens is at the Crystal Palace, which was his venue in California. And he's not feeling good. And by the way, I have this story from an insider. I can't name the person, but I do have this story from an insider. So, Buck Owens feels sick that day. And he's just going to go upstairs he had an apartment upstairs. And he's going to go upstairs and just not do his show and let the other group do it. Well, a couple come up to him, an elderly, older couple, and they say, we drove 8 hours to see you, Buck. We're so excited. So Buck turns around and gets on stage and did a show longer than what his normal show was. Ends it with Big in Vegas, goes upstairs to the apartment and dies.
My God.
Shit. That's a country music song because it's real. It's real.
I've been listening to Buck all month because of his song Santa Looked a Lot Like Daddy.
Yeah. That's one of those Christmas songs that's tolerable for me.
Oh, it's fun.
It is. It's when, there's some Christmas songs that to me are tolerable. I'm not a big Christmas music guy. I don't care for it. But there are a couple that are tolerable. Mostly the sad ones. I really like a sad Christmas song. Hard Candy Christmas, and if we make it through December. I mean, what are we going to do? Listen, it's not joyful for everybody.
I get
to me, it goes back to the reality of this is real.
I like Christmas music. I do.
What's your favorite?
Merry Christmas Baby by Otis Redding. Santa Claus is Coming to Town by Bruce Springsteen. Loving Time of the Year by Travis Tritt, written by Travis.
Of course.
And Santa Looked a Lot Like Daddy by Buck Owens.
Yeah. You know what? That's a solid list, Taylor. I can't dog you for that list.
Now, I do have to add one that I just learned about the other day. I heard Jessie at the piano and Waylon sitting next to her, and he's singing Silent Night, and it is great.
Waylon had that gospel ability. He could take a song that was a gospel and make it even more so. And he could take a song that wasn't and turn it into something like a gospel. We've talked about Revelation before. Have you ever heard his version of Delta Dawn?
Waylon sang Delta Dawn?
Waylon sang Delta Dawn.
I had no idea.
It's a religious experience, my friend. Check it out. I'm not going to say anything else.
Gotta write this down.
Write
Make sure I remember after.
Waylon sang Delta Dawn.
What's your best story? What's your best story about Waylon and Willie?
I have a good one. Now this isn't going to be an outrageous story because you asked me what the best is for me. When Waylon Jennings got sober in the 70s, 80s, Willie Nelson couldn't be at the sobriety party that Johnny Cash threw for Waylon. So he cut off his braids and sent them. And there's a picture of Waylon Jennings holding up Willie Nelson's red braids because that's what Willie could do for him.
Wow.
And that tells you how close they were.
Those two, man, you know, Willie's still living, but he's already a living legend. Cash and Waylon, to me, are like country music's Elvis. Their legend just continues to grow.
And it's going to more. You know, we have a new Waylon Jennings album coming out.
That's
2025.
Right. That's one of the
Shooters producing it.
One of the things I am most looking forward to about 2025. Waylon was number 2 on my Spotify rap this year, so I get a lot of Waylon in my life.
You're not excited for the aliens in World War III for 2025?
You know,
just Waylon.
I think there's some days where, hell, I hope they come.
Yeah,
we need we might need a great reset.
Some people think they're leaving, you know, that they were already here, but they're leaving.
Honestly,
that's why
could you blame them?
No.
If you came down here and you had had a viewing of us and all of our shit, I'd get the hell out of here too.
I'm right there with you, brother. I'm right there with you.
Are you into this drone story?
I mean, I'm in that part of the world. I haven't seen one, but I'm not into it in like you know, it's the aliens, or I think more than likely the story that they sort of tried to cover up is true, that there was some material that was lost and they're looking for it. We have lost nuclear material all over the place. How many nukes do they say are missing? There's like 20 missing nukes or something. Like, I'm sure they're just looking for whatever this material could be. Probably a nuke, maybe just a material that if it gets into the water, we all die. Who knows?
Okay, if we had 10 minutes to live and you got to listen to 3 songs, what would the 3 songs be?
Oh, man. All right, the first one is going to be... Boy, I'm going to try not to make them all Tom T. Hall songs, but they're probably all going to be Tom T. Hall songs. Tom T. Hall's Gimme Peace. Tom T. Hall's version of John Prine's Paradise. And the final one, and this one I would have to listen to as we die, is Tom T. Hall's song Turn It On, Turn It On, Turn It On.
You're going all 3 Tom T, buddy.
All 3 Tom T.
There is
I know
nothing surprising about that.
No. Have I talked about Turn It On, Turn It On, Turn It On before?
I don't know. I don't even know the song.
So Tom T has a song that's based on a true story. So Tom T. Hall grew up in Olive Hill, Kentucky. A couple towns over, he had heard a legend about a guy who was too sick. He enlisted in the war, probably World War I. Enlisted in the war. They wouldn't take him because he had some medical issues. The community turned on this kid. They said he was a coward, that he didn't go fight. Not knowing he couldn't, that he wanted to so badly. Well, the community's teasing drove this kid to put several of them in a grave. So Tom T. Hall grows up here in this story and writes a song called Turn It On, Turn It On, Turn It On. Same exact circumstances. The towns say this guy's a coward. So he goes, he buys a gun, he kills a bunch of people in the community. There's a manhunt for him. He's hiding out in a barn or something. The sheriff goes in to get him. He goes to pull the trigger on the sheriff and the gun won't go. And all the guy says is, the Lord must think a lot of you. So then he's transferred to prison and he's going to be executed. The preacher comes in and says, do you have any last words? And his last words were, turn it on, turn it on, turn it on.
Oh, like for the electricity?
For the electricity.
Wow.
Hell yeah, that's going to be my last song.
Well, it might be turn it off, turn it off, turn it off if they're attacking us.
Listen, I think we're all ready at this point. Man, that's the thing. There's so many interesting stories about like and obviously that's like my main thing is like, why was this song written? What was the
Right.
backstory? Bojangles.
Oh yeah, what's the story behind Mr. Bojangles?
I knew a man Bojangles and he danced for me. It's a true lyric. So Jerry Jeff Walker's in New Orleans getting plastered. And he's arrested for public, intoxication, indecency, whatever. At the same time, there's a serial killer running around New Orleans who they believe is a homeless person. So the police force arrest all the homeless people. So Jerry Jeff Walker gets arrested. He's thrown in a cell with like 8 other people. And one of them is this homeless man who referred to himself as Mr. Bojangles. And Jerry Jeff says that these 7 guys were just talking and passing the night, telling, their life stories. And Bojangles talks about his dog that died. And somebody else in the cell says, boy, what a downer. What a way to bring down everybody's mood. And Mr. Bojangles starts tap dancing. And so Jerry Jeff Walker gets out with that in mind and writes Mr. Bojangles. Every song about a dead dog can be considered the saddest song in country music. Mr. Bojangles is one. Feed Jake is another. If a dog is dying, it's sad.
So, hold on. In Feed Jake, Jake's not dying.
No, Jake's the dog.
If I die before I wake, feed Jake.
Well, but it's a death that relates. Yes, you're right. But it relates to a dog, and people like that. Because as much as there's this stereotype about the dog died, the dog ran away, it doesn't happen often. But when it does happen, it's very sad. But thank you for correcting me, Taylor. You were good call out.
Well, I have to call it out because the night that I put my beagle Otis down.
Oh, no.
It was about, 4 years ago now. I still haven't been able to get another one. I went home. And I was like, you know what you got to do in these moments? Because I put him down around midnight on Sunday night. So I get home around 1. And I'm like, in this kind of moment, you just got to sit with the pain. So I put on Feed Jake. And the tears were just pouring down I was like, why did I listen to this song?
Boy, you're going to sit here and call me a sick fuck?
Well, no, I think when you're going through a really difficult moment like that and you're feeling pain, just sit in it. And for some reason, my brain said, let's listen to Feed Jake.
That's wild.
It was a terrible idea, Holiday.
Now, not to bring up your sadness here, but Otis, named after Otis Redding, I presume?
After Otis Redding.
Man, I wish I knew more about Otis Redding. I'll tell you what I knew that Weldon didn't know is that Otis Redding died at 26 years old.
Not 26.
Wasn't 26?
No, 33, I believe.
Now, we got to Google this. I could have sworn.
So he was older. I mean, not super older, but he was like 33, I believe, when he died in a plane crash. But don't quote me on 33, but it's going to be in the 30s.
It says that he was born September 9th, 1941, and died December 10th, 1967. And Wikipedia says 26.
Oh, shoot. Why have I always thought he was in his 30s?
I think it's the voice, Taylor Swaid.
Well, thank you for correcting.
No, please, you're good. You see, you corrected me and then I corrected you because we're petty assholes like that. I
don't want to be wrong. That's crazy.
No, and listen, I'm right there with you. And that's why I say, seriously, the Feed Jake thing, thank you for, catching me on that.
Man, I swore a long time ago, someone told me, because I thought he was part of the 27 Club. People who die at 27, obviously not from ODing, but, and I looked it up one time and I thought he was 33. Hell, interesting.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, it's crazy too how like people hear something and then it becomes like lore. Like there are a lot of people that heard a story that Johnny Cash recorded Hurt because he did meth when he was done, like at his, like I mean, I met some of the Cash people and, most of them are well-adjusted folks. I don't think they were shooting him up with crack rock,
Bro, Otis Redding was 26 when he died. Imagine what we could have got out of him if he didn't die.
All these, dude, and that's the thing with so many great artists. Patsy Cline was young. I don't know the exact age. Jim Reeves was young. I don't know the exact age. Like, these people could have given so much and would have given so much more. The only person that you can say died young and might not have given anything is Jim Croce, because the story is that album he put out, he was going to retire.
Yeah.
But then you have like Leonard Skinner, half the band perishes and the lead singer, and they had a lot to give.
I cannot believe Otis was 26.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, and you probably already know this, the reason that there's like a whistle or whatever, or a hum at the end of Sitting at the Dock of a Bay, is because he didn't finish it.
Yeah, because him and Steve Cropper wrote it, and it was released after he died, so he didn't even see it become the biggest hit for him.
Yeah. Heartbreaking.
I think Otis Redding is one of the greatest voices of all time. He's in my top 5 artists of all time. How did I not know this? This is so weird. Anyway.
I
thought I knew more about Otis than I guess I do.
That's How Strong My Love Is has been blowing up on TikTok.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If I were the sun way up there.
And Otis was amazing. And another one that was amazing, Percy Sledge. When a man loves a woman.
Yeah.
He has a cover of Today I Started Loving You Again.
Didn't Percy cut that in Muscle Shoals?
Oh, that's a Weldon question. Probably.
Me and Weldon went with Jim McBride to see Fame Studios.
I've heard.
Yeah. And Otis cut You Left the Water Running in there. Wow. But I think Percy Sledge cut When a Man Loves a Woman in there. But again, I could be wrong.
If you say it, I believe it, because
I'm wrong a lot. I'm wrong a lot. I cannot believe still. I did not know Otis was 26 when he died. That man had a lot of life in his voice, brother.
I know.
Anyway, I interrupted you on Percy Sledge.
No, I finished the statement. Percy Sledge had recorded Today I Started Loving You Again, the Merle Haggard song.
Okay.
Which, is so wild to see those worlds collide. Because you just wouldn't think Percy Sledge and Merle Haggard would work,
It's really not, Holiday, in my opinion. One of the greatest albums of the 90s was Rhythm, Country, and Blues, produced by Don Was and Tony Brown. And it was one of the greatest collections of R&B singers paired with country singers. You got Aaron Neville with Trisha Yearwood. You got Travis Tritt with Patti LaBelle. Clint Black with the Pointer Sisters. Conway Twitty with Sam Moore, I believe.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is that where George Jones and Ben King did Patches?
I believe so.
That song, now that my dad's dead, it hurts me to listen to that song. I haven't listened to it since my dad died.
That is one of the greatest covers. Let me see. Let me just confirm if it's Ben King. Patches, but yeah, it was on Rhythm, Country, and Blues. Yes, and B.B. King.
B.B. King, sorry. So B.B. King and George Jones do Patches, which I think was a Clarence Carter song originally. And Patches, for those of you guys don't know, and this isn't the country song Patches where you just don't put new patches on. It's not that one. It's a song about a little boy who's 13 and his father's on his deathbed. And he calls in he's called Patches because they're poor. And he calls in his son. And Patches, I'm depending on your son to pull the family through. And it's like, dude, this 13-year-old boy is now the man of the house, responsible for all of these siblings, his mother, and he doesn't know what to do, but he's Patches, And my dad listened to that song one time, and for whatever reason, it's one of those memories of Hook, because my dad did not listen to country music. Did not do it. He liked country music and would occasionally dabble, but for the most part, he hated my music taste, because my music taste is what was coming out when he was a child. and he hated it. My dad was 74 when he died, so he was an older fella, and he did not like this for me. But that song just hits me every time.
It's a great song. It's a great album. And there's have you ever seen the documentary about the album being made?
No.
Okay. It's on YouTube. So just search the Rhythm, Country, and Blues documentary, and you will really enjoy watching it. They kind of dig into each performance. You got Marty Stewart on there with the, golly, it's a family. I cannot remember who he sings with on that, but my whole point, going back to what you were originally saying, is they say this so much on the documentary about how rhythm and blues is just the white man's blues, and it was really a great moment where some racial boundaries got torn down.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to go listen to When Something Is Wrong with My Baby, when Travis sings with Patty. Oh my God.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
But the crossover between country and R&B is not celebrated enough, but it's very apparent once you listen to the lyrics from both. You can see why everything that's in a lyric with R&B is applicable to a country lyric.
Well, look at Chris Stapleton. He's a great example. Beyonce, a great example of that. And that's. I agree that it works. It's just when you think of the name Merle Haggard and then you think of Percy Sledge, you're thinking, man, how does this work? It's sort of like David Allan Coe and what was it, Hawkshaw Hawkins, or no, not Hawkshaw. Hawkshaw's the country artist. Screamin' Jay Hawkins were met in prison, allegedly. So it's just interesting how these different groups, meet. And
well, these are the moments in music where things get torn down, like when Nirvana does Lead Belly.
Yeah.
In the Pines.
Yeah.
Songs translate.
Yeah.
Good songs, good lyrics translate. I mean, Jim McBride was telling me that there are countless covers of Rose in Paradise out there. It's Waylon's last number one. Toy Caldwell had done it before that. Great lyrics get interpreted in different genres.
Yeah. A good one that I listen to is Atlanta's Burning Down, which was a song one of Waylon's guitarists had written. And Waylon had done it. I don't think he ever put it out, but there was a demo of him doing it. You can find it on YouTube. And Dickie Betts liked the song so much, it was like the name of his album was Atlanta's Burning Down. And it's a story of a soldier that goes and leaves his own home to go fight in a war. And then his home and the people that he loves back in Atlanta, they're being slayed, prison is a big thing in country music too. And I think prisons are where country music gets shared a lot. One of my all-time favorite stories. George Jones and Stonewall Jackson are doing a prison tour. Not like a prison tour is in just going around to see the prison, but like they're playing for the prisoners. Because Johnny Cash was not the first to do this. It was something that people did do. So George Jones and Stonewall Jackson, great friends, are in Texas. And they're doing their shows. And they meet some of the prisoners. And Stonewall Jackson makes a big whoopsie daisy. Take a guess what he did, Taylor Swaid.
I don't know.
He asked one of the prisoners, how long are you in for? And the prisoner responded, I've been in here 18 years and I've still got life to go. Now, Taylor Swaid, me and you are guys that are on the outside. If you talk to a prisoner and he made that statement, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. And that's how it hit George. So George overhears this. And George says in his book that what hurt him most is that he didn't want to be there, and neither did this guy. But at the end of the day, George at least knew he got to go home. And so George went home, and he wrote the song Life to Go.
Wow.
Billy Strings and his dad did that recently, for those of you that are into that.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Billy Strings did an album with like his dad and maybe like a grandfather or something where it was just Billy's playing and his dad and grandpa or whoever. I think it's just him and his dad. They do these songs that they grew up on. And Life to Go is one of the songs they do.
Now, Billy is one of those guys that is already transcending genres.
Yeah. Yeah, but transcending genres in a way that he's keeping the old stuff alive too.
Yes.
Cocaine Blues is a big one. Life to Go is one. A song that Blaze Foley did, kind of jokingly, it's called I Want to Go Home with an Armadillo. For the life of me, I do not know if armadillo means he is literally taking home the animal, or if armadillo is like slang for an older lady with like scaly skin. But the lyrics, either way, would infer that he is having sex with whatever he is speaking of. And it's one of those deep cuts, because Blaze Foley wasn't a super well-known artist, because he passed away, unfortunately, young. He was murdered. But Billy Strings does that song. And brought it to a whole new audience, which is so great.
I love it. I think he played Cocaine Blues on Theo Von.
Probably. It's one that he does a lot. Another
song that was famously performed in a prison.
Yeah. And one of those songs that Cash sang it with his whole chest. And I can't forget the day I shut that bad bitch down. Like, Johnny Cash said bitch on a record in the day. That's unheard of. And he was one of those guys that would take those risks.
Well, he did that on Sunday Morning Coming Down on a TV show or at an award show?
The Johnny Cash show. So he has this, I think it was on CBS, the CBS Johnny Cash show. And he wants to sing Sunday Morning Coming Down. Chris Christopherson's there. And they tell him, if you sing this, you have to change the lyrics. You can't sing Wishin' Lord That I Was Stoned. He says, I'm gonna. And they go, you have to change it. Wishin' Lord I Was Home. Well, that was the whole, Wishin' Lord I'm Stoned is the whole point of the song. So John went out on his show, looks up at Chris Christopherson and sings it with his whole chest. And that would lead to the show being canceled.
Now, that was a show that transcended genres too. You have, I think we're going to see it in this upcoming Bob Dylan film.
Yeah.
Johnny.
All right, I think the film's out.
I thought it came out on Christmas, but could be wrong again. But I think it comes out on Christmas, but I know that Johnny Cash is in the film.
Yeah.
But he also had, who else did he have? He had Louis Armstrong on. He was breaking down a lot of racial barriers.
He would have a lot of people on. If I thought I could get to it, I would go to my stack. I have a bunch of them, and I would tell you just who's on them. But he had Mamas and the Papas. I mean, he was transcending not just diversity and race and whatnot. He was transcending genre and these groupings, and it was prime time television. And Johnny Cash would have either 2 or 3 guests. If he did 2 guests, it would be someone that he knew really well and someone that he liked really well. And then it would be, if he had 3 guests, it would be someone young, someone old, and then someone completely off the wall and different. Like Soupy Sales was on the Johnny Cash show.
Have you ever seen the moment from the Mamas and Papas when they made them lip sync and the girl eats a banana?
Yes. God, there's so many moments like that, though. That's what's crazy. You would have thought back in the day, these people that were doing these shows would have said, hey, just sing the song. That's what you do. You're the artist. But yeah, I don't remember the lady's name, but she eats a banana while they're supposed to be singing.
And Alan Jackson did that. Alan Jackson's drummer did it with playing with a drum with no sticks during one of the award show when they were told to play to a track.
Yeah, and then later, Alan stopped the whole show because George Jones was told they were cutting his time, and George Jones said, well, then I'm not doing it. So Alan went out and sang a George Jones song.
Yeah, he went from
Papa
Top into Choices.
Yep.
And
which Papa Top was a Jim Ed Brown song.
One of the reasons I'm really excited for a guy like Zach Top or Braxton Keith is I've always referenced Alan Jackson and George Strait to people as 2 guys who didn't have all the lights and smoke, but they've had the longest lasting careers as far as consistency goes. They've transcended, they've dominated over 3 or 4 decades, even more, and they've been true to themselves. I am so tired of this show. I love to see that the guys who just go out there and give you what they got and they don't make it about all the bells and whistles are the ones who achieve the longest lasting legacy. And I kind of see that with a guy like Zach and Braxton.
Yeah, I was given the pleasure of interviewing Braxton sort of right as he was taking off. And he's such a supportive dude. And he didn't know me prior to me interviewing. And it was a great interview, and he was a cool guy. And he'll still, hop into my lives from time to time and drop a small tip, and just he riffs from time to time. He's a fun dude who generally loves country music. And that's what I got from him when I interviewed him. Because I've interviewed a lot of people who, when you talk to them, they're country music musicians, you can tell hate country music. They're in it because it's their easy way out. It's their easy way to break into music, and then they're going to go off and do something else. I've interviewed guys who have literally done like Marty Robbins songs, and you would be like, man, what's your favorite Marty Robbins song? And they're like, I don't listen to Marty Robbins. It's like, oh, well, you covered them on your newest album. And they're like, oh, well, I just know that song. It's like, oh, all right, well, bummer.
Now, you told me Braxton has like a deep knowledge of the history, right?
Yeah, when we talked, the guy's a historian, man.
Well, those are the kind of people I like to see, like Marty Stewart. I pull from Marty Stewart on top of being a great musician, a great singer, just the all-around package, even in the fashion with with the stuff he wears. He's the whole package, but he also embraces the history. He's building this Library of Congress in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Or what is it called? The Congress of Country Music, I think.
Yeah.
Like the guy who loves the history as much as his own career. It's special when you get someone who isn't just about themselves and their own career, and they love the entire history.
Yeah, especially someone like him who a lot of the artifacts that he's after are artifacts that maybe the average person would just say, oh, that's trash. Like his era, like he's going back to the beginning with Jimmy Rogers, right? He's not one of these guys like you and I sort of segment our knowledge and segment our era. He doesn't. He's everything. He has it all. And that's so commendable and respectable because there's just so much.
Marty's a legend, man.
I agree. I think of a lot of those guys who were such influences who never got their flowers. Like I've talked about Farron Young and Tom T. Hall, Don Gibson. Don Gibson wrote one of the most famous songs of all time. And there's like an asterisk where it's like, who's Don Gibson? I Can't Stop Loving You. Elvis Presley, Ray Charles, Conway, all these people recorded it. It started with Don Gibson. And Don Gibson had a pretty decent recording career back in the day with I Can't Stop Loving You and Oh Lonesome Me and those sort of songs. But now it's like, who's Don Gibson?
Well, he got his moment with a great song.
Yeah, and that's the truth. I find myself sometimes I feel bitter for those guys because I know
it's a wasted emotion.
I know it irks me sometimes.
The songwriters that I've had the pleasure of spending time with now on the podcast, at lunch, just hanging out, talking on the phone, they have no bitterness. They are so content with what they've done in their careers. And the songwriters who never got their shot as musicians or artists, they have happier lives. They don't have to deal with all the bull crap. And you were talking earlier about Brotherhood. The brotherhood amongst songwriters is almost stronger than the artists, because these are the people that get to hang out every day. The artists are out touring. It's just them and their band, and they're having to be here for press and everything. The songwriters, man, they're just about the songs, and they are perfectly happy with what they've done in their life.
Yeah, and that's what I'm learning too. Is I'm not in an opportunity like you guys where I've met a lot of these folks or even been able to speak to many of them. So I'm learning that they're all happy. It's something that chaps my hide sometimes when like someone will mention I'll give you a great example. Someone will mention how, Fancy is a Reba song. It's like, well, it is. Reba did great things for the song. Bobby Gentry put her life into that. Like, it's just things like that get me.
Well, if you were Don Gibson and you had a cut by Ray Charles and Elvis, would you be walking?
Oh yeah, I'm just thrilled that they cut it. Yeah. But the other thing too, I guess, is like he wasn't just a writer. He was also a performer. So like I know that was his big performance too. So I get maybe he looks at it as like flattery. I guess that's you and Weldon are optimistic, and we talk about this all the time. You guys are glass half full people, and there's nothing in the glass at all person.
Depends on the day for me.
Well, Weldon says that my pessimistic nature is exhausting. So
let me ask you, what do you think are the best music movies of all time?
When you say, do you mean like documentary wise too, or just in general?
You can do documentary or film.
Okay. You would have to throw, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou has to be one. I can't think of another movie that's transcended everything like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou. It's the Odyssey is what it is, but it brought back to life country music and folk style. The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas is a great film with a lot of great music. Of course, man, Heart-Worn Highways is more of a documentary. It's fantastic. I can't just do 3 because that's hard. Like Walk the Line. If I don't mention Walk the Line, the comments are going to be filled with people. He didn't mention Walk the Line. Reese Witherspoon and, Joaquin Phoenix did the greatest job. Even like the Buddy Holly story with Gary Busey. Like, it's hard to just name 3, but I guess those are a handful of some of the ones that I enjoy the most.
Did I only ask for 3?
I think you asked for 3.
Oh, I thought I was just asking for a few of them.
Maybe you did. I don't know.
I would throw in A Star Is Born.
Oh, I'm gonna upset you, Taylor. I've never watched that movie. None of the versions. I won't do it.
Oh my God.
I won't do. But here's why I won't do it. To be fair, to me, if I watch the original black and white version, it's not going to mean as much to me as if I watch the Kris Kristofferson, Barbra Streisand version. I'm not going to watch the Lady Gaga and who's the fella who did
Bradley Cooper. It's terrific.
Bradley Cooper. I get that. Oh, I thought of another one. I'll get to that. And to me, I don't know. It's when I watch, how like there are some actors where you might befriend them, or maybe you watch them in a movie or a TV show when they're young, and then you see them in something later, and you're like, oh, Bryan Cranston's not Walter White. That's Malcolm's dad. Like, you just can't take it seriously. Kris Kristofferson is Kris Kristofferson. I can't take him seriously as, another entity.
Well, let's throw in another one. Crazy Heart.
Crazy Heart's a good one. A great soundtrack.
A great soundtrack. Shout out to Ryan Bingham.
Yeah. I think when you're in that position where you're like, man, we want to get as much music as possible into this thing, the folks that they hire do such a fantastic job.
They really do.
And like fitting the mood and everything. I think of like There was a show on Broadway or whatever back in the day that was a depiction of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn that Roger Miller had written the score for, like River in the Rain, I think was the name of the musical, but it was also one of the main songs. And Roger Miller, of course, did Robin Hood, the Disney film. Those are also films with a lot of music. And I guess I'll end it there with, like, as far as movies with music in it, because I know I'm forgetting a billion, but to me, the bar one, it's Oh Brother Where Art Thou.
Yes, I was talking to someone the other day, and I told them that it's not even, well, it is close, but my clear number one for best soundtrack of all time is Oh Brother Where Art Thou.
Now you say it's close. What would be like the number two?
All right, so if we're going soundtracks, okay, so Gladiator, it's more of a scored movie, but it's one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. I'm going to throw in Young Guns 2. Are you on mute?
Yeah, so sorry, there's some beeping happening outside. There is, I hope you can't hear that. So that's one of the movies Weldon tells me to watch that I haven't watched. There's a handful of movies that I've never watched that Weldon has like a running list of things I should watch. Lonesome Dove, The Young Guns is on there. I'll tell you one that because I didn't realize we were just doing random scores here. I thought you wanted me to like keep it to films with like a musical, like that's the whole point.
Well, no, because now we moved on to soundtracks.
Yeah, I'll tell you. And this will lead into some of my favorite films ever. Casino.
Oh, yes.
The Casino soundtrack is phenomenal. And once again, those people that make the decision of what song we're going to play at what point, when the House of the Rising Sun comes on, that is the most perfect use of that song in any adaptation ever.
Yeah.
And I guess it's interesting that some of my favorite films do have like pretty unique scores for the most part. Like, boy, I know you didn't want to get into favorite movies, but can I riff a little bit here, Taylor?
Yeah, buddy, I'll talk to you about anything. I don't have anything nothing's off the table for you.
So some of my favorite movies. I'll start off. I can give you a top 5 for once, Taylor.
I'll believe
Number
it.
5.
I'll believe it when I hear it.
Number 5 is The Iron Giant. The Iron Giant is an animated film that I just love so much. It's near and dear to my heart as a youth. Number 4, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Cool.
Jack Nicholson had a masterful performance. Danny DeVito, all those individuals. They made you believe they were all nuts. Number 3. I think that this is a film nobody's heard of. To Kill the Irishman. This is not the movie with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci as old people. This is a movie about a guy named Danny Green who was a real person. And this is where we're going to see like my top 3 are all mafia films. So To Kill an Irishman, fantastic movie. Everyone should watch it. 1 and 2 are interchangeable depending on how I'm feeling.
Godfather.
No.
What?
No. We'll talk about that in a second. Casino and Goodfellas.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant part 1 and part 2. Yeah, those are great picks.
Yeah, no. 1 and 2. I'll tell you, me and Weldon just talked about this last night. I hate the Godfather movie.
Oh, shut
Taylor.
This. I will hit stop recording right now, young
Taylor,
man.
Here's the problem with it. For the first 40 minutes, we're at a wedding. And it feels like, here's the thing, they did immersion great. Because I am fucking miserable because I'm at this goddamn wedding. That's the one thing they did great. The ball starts getting rolling, and yes, it's a great film after that, but the second one is better than the first one.
I agree.
Because the first one is such a miserable... They didn't need the first one because the second one rehashes the first one, and the first one, the first half of the film is this miserable wedding, and I feel like I'm really there. I'm banging my head off the walls. I can't do it.
Great movies need time to build. They need the story to build, and I agree it ran a little bit long, but I love The Godfather.
And I appreciate that opinion. I do. And I understand this is just me being a curmudgeon. I don't know if it's just my hatred of weddings or what, Taylor, but I'm telling you, I can't do that movie.
Wow. Well, you got some good ones, man, because Goodfellas and Casino are terrific.
Yeah. And I know people, like someone might say, well, they're the same movie. I think that those two films are beautifully adapted from the real world, where it's the opposite of what I said earlier, where like, can I take Walter White, seriously because I've seen him as Hal, the dad on Malcolm in the Middle? It's the opposite. When you watch Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro, you know that that's the casting that they do. But they bring those characters to life as individuals.
Yeah, we were talking about soundtracks, and it's one of the interesting things for me with soundtracks is if it's an original score, if it's an originally written for this movie. So like with the original score, you got Gladiator. Originally written for the movie, you have like Young Guns 2. And I think did Ryan write for Crazy Heart?
I would assume so, but I do not know.
Because that's a great album. And then you get into like Dazed and Confused, where what you were talking about earlier, like the talent, which I think it's less talent, to be honest with you, but the talent of picking out a song for the moment, like in Dazed and Confused, when they do Hurricane walking into the pool hall, that's a moment in a movie. And then
I suppose the Bob Dylan movie will skip over that song, huh?
You think? Oh,
yeah,
because the controversy. Yeah. Well, then, and then like again, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I mean, the recreation of music for film.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the best.
I agree.
Goodfellas, anything from Scorsese and Tarantino, they always know how to pick great songs for great moments.
Yeah, and masterfully done. Another film that has a great score that, once again, because I'm a young person, is Shrek.
Okay.
The Shrek score, if you've never listened to the Shrek soundtrack, it's some good stuff. There are people who I can tell you enjoy like the Monkees, like 1970s style Monkees albums because of Shrek. And then I saw faith, I'm a believer. Shrek was originally supposed to be played by Chris Farley.
Oh, really?
And it used to be Lost Media. So Lost Media is one of those things that Taylor, I'm interested in finding that stuff. It used to be one of those things that was a rumor that was true because the studio had confirmed it and Mike Myers had confirmed it, but there was no proof. Well, apparently there were some recordings, and there was like an early storyboard adaptation that someone dug up. And so on YouTube, you can hear Chris Farley reading for Shrek.
Wow.
It's wild.
Cody Tucker, who I had on last week, he does tons of reels on people that were supposed to be cast in roles. And it's fascinating to see like who was supposed to be in the role.
There's some like, I don't know, like I do like animated things. I'm not anime. I'm not into that. I want to make that clear. None of that weeb shit around here. But I like animated stuff because I like seeing these famous actors become different roles. Like if Robert De Niro ever played an animated character, it would be so odd, but it might work, And like Mark Hamill played the animated Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Another person was supposed to play that role. Tim Curry. Pennywise the Clown was supposed to play the Joker in the animated Batman.
Okay.
And it's another form of lost media that it was something that for all these years nobody found until last year. Last year, when Kevin Conroy passed away, the voice of the animated Batman, somebody found the Tim Curry clip. Because what happened was they had Tim Curry film a couple episodes, and then they used it, like they brought in the test audience with the kids, and they were too afraid of his depiction of the Joker.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, Mark Hamill also has the crazy laugh, but apparently Tim Curry was like too scary for these kids. Like they would cry.
You know, can I go back to Chris Farley,
Please.
the dark side of comedy?
Oh, a masterpiece of a series. The whole Dark Side franchise over there is masterful, but go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just saying that, you know, you think about like the Belushis and the Farleys, and it's funny, I was actually referencing it as the dark side of comedy, but
Oh,
you bring up the series, which is terrific.
yeah, like they have so many um series. Like there's the dark side of the 90s, there's the dark side of the 2000s, there's the dark side of comedy, the dark side of wrestling, which those are all things that like I'm, even though I'm out of touch, I those are things that I like learning about. And so like when it started with dark side of wrestling, which I'm an old school sort of wrestling, fan. Like my grandfather loved professional wrestling, so like I picked it up from him. And
Yeah.
as an adult, I don't watch, but every once in a while, I'll see like an old clip, like from when my grandfather was young. It's like 1970 Ric Flair versus Terry Funk beating each other with barbed wire and branding irons. It's like hell yeah. And then they took that and turned it into dark side of comedy, dark side of 90s, dark side of 2000s. And the people that they did that series on, like just to name a couple: Chris Farley,
Mhm.
Andrew Dice Clay, Greg Giraldo. Then they had season 2 with Robin Williams, Sam Kinison, Gilda Radner, Norm. They are masterful in how they do these shows. And like you hear, like when we watch Robin Williams, we think, man, Robin Williams was my childhood. I saw him as the genie in Aladdin, or I saw him in Mrs. Doubtfire, or whatever. But then you hear, like, here was a guy who was addicted to substances, who made us laugh as a stand-up, as an actor, but then his life was torturous. He was tormented.
Right.
And like Richard Pryor, another one, tormented. The dude did a set as God. Howie Mandel tells this great electric story of the time Richard Pryor goes up in front of an audience and says, I am God. You killed my, I am God. I want to talk to Jesus. I want to talk to my son. And the audience is like giggling, like confused. And they're like, he's like, what happened to Jesus? And the audience responds like, Jesus was killed. Jesus is dead. Oh, you killed my son, and like tears and scream, you killed my son. I need to talk to someone. Bring me Martin Luther King. Where's Martin Luther King? He was killed. Bring me John F. Kennedy. That is a tormented man.
Yeah.
Now, just so everybody's not super depressed here, you have someone like, on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have someone like Andrew Dice Clay, who does an album called The Day the Laughter Died, where he went out and riffed, and it was a bomb. And somebody in the audience yells out, you're about as funny as a glass of milk, which is the funniest part of the whole album.
Do you know who produced that album?
No, not a clue. Probably Rodney Dangerfield.
Rick Rubin.
Was it really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow. I had no idea.
Rick Rubin and Dice thought it was funny that they were bombing. It was an intentional bomb.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was there were no notes. It was unrehearsed. And yes, he thought it was hysterical. But at the end of the day, a bomb is a bomb, You're a comedian, and like to him it's funny, but then you're trying to sell this as an album, and your audience, like when you pay tickets to see something and it bombs, you're like, that sucked. Now people are in on the bit. People are in on the joke. But if I would have bought the Day the Laughter Died album, maybe I would have been pissed off if the album sucked,
Yeah.
I guess Dice just didn't care. Sam Kinnison's another one of those guys that you get such an interesting dynamic. Like, grew up a preacher's kid. He himself had grown up to be some religious figure of some sort, and then left that and became a comedian, and crass and brutal, doing like necrophilia comedy and like screaming, and he gets clean off the drugs, having the greatest time of his life. He's on a highway and gets hit head on by a teenager who was drinking and dies. It's like, dude, this guy couldn't live without the misery. He had to die, and he didn't want to die. The fucking part of it that blows my mind. The people that were there say that he was fine at first, that he got out of the car and just sat next to the side of the road and said, "Why now? But I don't want to go." And then he said, "I understand," and died. And people believe that he was talking to somebody on the other end who was bringing him home.
Right.
That's gut-wrenching. That's the kind of thing that, like, I want to hear a country song about that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear that, because that's real. And, you know, you think about how important comedy was back then, but look at how important comedy is now.
It is more important now than it's ever been, in my opinion.
Like, no, yeah, because these guys are on the news, they're on podcasts, they have the most, Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, all these people are the most listened to shows. And it all started with the comedians that they loved and the radio shows that they loved. Like, are you familiar with Opie and Anthony?
Oh, yeah. O&A?
Yeah. Okay. Thank God someone fucking knows something. So, you know, Joe Rogan went on O&A all the time.
Yeah.
And their show style, because they were the most unprepared people of all time, they just let you walk in and start talking. A lot of the guests didn't even know they were on the air, which led to some interesting issues later. But that's how Joe Rogan set up his podcast. He has said that he based his podcast entirely off of doing Opie and Anthony.
Well,
and
that and Tom Green.
Well, yes, but he said that the big thing was when he used to do O&A, he found it so interesting that you would go in and it was just
a conversation.
On. Yeah, and they would talk about anything, and they would do crazy stuff, and they were, you know, Howard Stern's greatest competitors.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing about Stern is people give Stern a hard time now as an 80-year-old man or whatever because he's woke and not fun. But the shit he used to do was outrageous.
Yeah, but he was a prick a lot. But I listen, I like Howard Stern. I think it's a good show, but he was a prick to a lot of people.
He was a prick to a lot of people.
Like
and
he used people for his own gain, and now he's taking his foot off the brake and criticizing other people when he himself was. You know what he did to Rogan one time? He had Rogan in the studio, and he had a woman come in the studio who told Joe to his face that she had aborted his baby.
Yeah.
So he used that whole situation for his own gain.
And he was the king of doing that. And that's why they call him the king of all media. You know, he did a lot of fucked up shit. Mancow, I think, is out of Chicago. A disc jockey out of Chicago. When Mancow's father died, Stern called him and went insane. Like, just crazy. And, like, Stern had a way of not knowing when to turn it off, but his audience were obnoxious like that. Like, he would, if he was brought into a market where there was a successful radio show, he knew if he was brought into the market, that radio show was going to die. He would hold funerals. And back in the day, he would go. One of the sad things he did, there was a radio disc jockey out of Philadelphia who he hated. So that disc jockey ended up getting divorced from his wife. Stern brought on his wife. Made her basically sit on his lap. I don't want to say made her, but she had sat on his lap in studio and talked about how her ex-husband was this, piece of shit. Later, that lady killed herself.
Oh, whoa.
And her husband's career's down the toilet. Like, he legitimately fucked people's lives.
Wow.
And then, but that's the thing with being a shock jock, back in the day, the FCC went hard at Stern. And they used to do these polls at the stations and the FCC of like, if Stern's so terrible and we're getting so many negative reports about him, why are there so many listeners? And the reason is people cited that they just wanted to hear what he was going to say next.
Oh, yeah. 3 times, Cody was telling me last week, 3 times as many people that listened to Stern hated him.
Yeah.
Because they want to
literally
see
that ratio.
Yeah, they wanted to see what he would say next. So if you hated him for what he said, you actually listened more.
Yeah. So it's one of those circumstances where like this individual who is like fucked up beyond belief as far as morality goes also is one of the most loyal people ever. So Robin Quivers and Fred Norris have been with him since the start. Robin is fired at NBC. And she's offered a job with another disc jockey. This is where it comes full circle. He's offered a job with another disc jockey, the Grease Man. The Grease Man is the same person who Greg Opie Hughes of Opie and Anthony worked with and learned from, to then go on to be the person to dethrone Stern in New York. When Robin was fired, she didn't go to work with the Grease Man. But her and Howard had this rift between them at the time because she couldn't not work. And Stern kept telling her, Robin, I'm going to fix this. He says, you can't. Well, later he got her back. That's unheard of in radio shows. It's unheard of in podcasts. We see podcasts imploding, radio shows implode. Opie and Anthony imploded. It imploded because stupid people did stupid things and they flew too close to the sun. So Anthony Cumia had always been more of an aggressive kind of figure, especially with some of his political opinions and some of his race baiting and things of that nature. He's out on a walk. He gets a new camera. He's out on a walk in New York, and he takes a picture of an African-American prostitute. And she sees him take the picture, and she goes to attack him. And he then, in response, goes on Twitter and just goes off about women and, race. He's being terribly racist. There's terrible things. And he gets fired. Well, he and Opie already didn't get along because when you work with someone for 20 years, you're bound to have issues with each other. They had issues. They went from being best friends when they started to hating each other at the end. And so for Opie, it was like a gift because he was jealous of the success that Anthony had. People didn't like Opie because Opie was very predictable and very one track and he would repeat himself a lot. Like there were bingo cards that people had of like Greg Opie Hughes, things that he would say. And he goes on to do the show with Jim Norton. Jim Norton thought when Anthony got fired, he was done too, because Jim Norton didn't think Sirius was going to pay him. He was just the third mic comedian, And then they had their show. They started having issues. Jim Norton's still going strong, by the way, with Sam Roberts, but Opie and Anthony's been dead for 10, 15 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And Stern, the point being, Stern and Robin Quivers and Fred Norris, even if they have issues with each other, you would never know it. They've gone strong for 40 and 50 years.
Yeah. Stern's show has changed a lot. But
Yeah.
back in the day, it served a purpose.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a game changer, and he fought a lot of battles that other people weren't willing to fight, and he really did push the envelope and change the game for a lot of people. So I'll credit him for that.
It was trash entertainment, but so was Jerry Springer. So was, by the way, Donahue. Donahue did some really terrible things too. Geraldo Rivera, Mr. The News is a flirty business. When oh man, Taylor Swaid, let me go crazy here for a second. When Matt Lauer got in trouble for what he did to those poor women, Geraldo Rivera went on record as saying, the news is a flirty business. The guy had a fucking lock under his desk that if he clicked the button, the door locked. That is some Epstein levels of creepy ingenuity.
Geraldo did?
Matt Lauer did.
I'm sorry, Lauer. I thought you were saying Geraldo.
Yeah. Geraldo, after that happened, went on the news and publicly said, well, the news is a flirty business. Almost like dismissing these women.
Dismissing, yeah.
And Geraldo back in the day used to do what the same shit Springer did. They brought on the Ku Klux Klan. They have the Ku Klux Klan over here and then the Black Panthers. And then Geraldo gets a chair thrown, smashes his face. And now he's a hero.
Yeah.
It's like, give me a break.
That was his viral moment back then. Yeah.
Jenny Jones, the Jenny Jones show had, I think that was her name. It was a short run daytime show, but she had an individual on who they were doing sort of like the Jerry Springer thing before Jerry Springer. So it was very schoolgirly. Someone here has a crush on you and we're going to bring him in. So they bring this guy on and they say, there's someone who you work with who has a crush on you. Do you have any idea who it could be? And he names this girl and he's like, yeah, I'm into her. They bring out that girl. And that girl is like, oh no, it's not me. It's a friend of ours. And they bring out a gay guy. This is the 1990s. This is not now. This segment happens. The original person they brought on goes to the gay guy's house and kills him.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. Donahue did professional wrestling's had a lot of scandals, and it has a scandal right now because Vince McMahon is being questioned for some things that he's been doing with an intern that he had.
Did you watch the documentary?
Yes, I did.
Very good.
Very good. If I hope Netflix continues the story.
Yeah, well, they say, the allegations. Well, there's always been allegations with Vince, but they say in the thing, like, we were already doing this before, like the new. So it was interesting to see how that came to fruition and transpired during it.
My understanding is that the original idea for the documentary was going to be the Vince McMahon legacy, because the WWE had signed the deal to go to Netflix, which will happen in 2025. It was originally going to be like a documentary. Well, then all this stuff comes out about Vince, and they needed to shift gears because Vince and family weren't talking anymore. So back in the day, there was the ring boy scandal. They used to have in different towns young boys that would put together the ring for the event each night. They would put it up and put it down. Several executives back in the 80s were accused of having inappropriate relations with these kids. So in the 90s, when Vince McMahon is indicted during the steroid trial because everybody's juiced to high heaven, Donahue has on Vince McMahon to talk about all these things. And he brings up the ring boy scandal. He didn't have any of the boys on air, but he had a man named Barry Orton. Barry Orton comes from a very famous family in professional wrestling, the Orton family. Randy Orton's a wrestler now. Bob Orton was a wrestler prior. Barry is Bob's brother. So Barry had a story about how an executive at the WWF at the time, they were riding in the car, and Barry got assaulted by this man and was told, you'll never work again if, you know, you don't do this. Donahue victim blamed Barry Orton. And then now, like, and once again, back in those days, we didn't know what we knew now, what we know now. But imagine if that was a woman who was facing her accuser on live television. Would Donahue have said, I think you're full of shit, pal? It never would happen.
Mm-mm.
Even back then, that never would happen. So it's weird, man. It's weird seeing all of these things happen and like crash down. Because like there have been building blocks since the 70s for some of these things, you know?
Well, I think that it's an interesting time in media. There's more reality now in media because of podcasting than there's ever been. There's more of an interest, a time to. So, you know, Dylan Weldon does a 90-second clip and puts them out, you know, however many times a week on Instagram. Podcasting now gives him a platform to go out and introduce more about himself in long form podcasts. And so you get a deeper look into who people are. The talk shows were just clickbait bullshit. They were, I guess they were view bait bullshit back in the day.
But before it was a thing, exactly.
You know, I loved Springer.
Mm-hmm.
I would guess 90% chance they were paid actors, but I loved it.
From what I understand, early in the day, they were not paid actors. Later, they became paid actors. Do you know why Springer, being the person to do that show, worked so well?
Yeah, because he was a disgraced former mayor of Chicago.
The guy used state checks to pay a hooker. Nothing is greater than that.
What? Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Wasn't he mayor of Chicago?
Yeah, it's a mayor. I think it was I want to say it was in Ohio, but maybe it was Chicago. Yeah, mayor something. One of these places.
He was a politician.
Yeah, and used his state checkbook. That's wild.
I mean, you know, just see what you can get away with.
Yeah, well, exactly, and I'm sure you know they.
Seems like there's going to be an audit one day, and this could be a problem.
Yeah, I think like when we talk about interesting stories and we talk about these things, it really is just the people that 10 years ago were heroes are now disgraced. Like, look at the journalists we had 15 years ago. Brian Williams, Matt Lauer. These are now disgraced people. Well, I mean, Brian Williams is still around, but he was disgraced. He lost the most important gig in news.
Well, didn't he fake like he was on a helicopter or something in a war zone?
Yeah, so he had told this lie that he was in a war zone and they were taking fire. And then it came out that that wasn't true. And I mean, obviously you're a journalist, you can't be making shit up. So the nightly news, they fired him from that gig and moved him to like MSNBC.
I love that shit. Have you ever seen the one where the woman on, it's either CNN or the Weather Channel, is in the middle of a storm and she's acting like the wind is so crazy you can barely stand up, and she's holding on to something, and then behind her somebody comes walking by?
It's always so funny to see those sort of clips because like it's exactly that. You're seeing that this is all just bull.
It's all bullshit.
Man, I remember you asked me a question the other day about the moon landing.
Oh, yes. Come on, bring it.
I wasn't going to do this, but I'll tell you. I was in 4th grade in Mr. Rorabaugh's class, and they were doing some sort of lunar launch. And I remember we're watching on the TV, and the camera feed cuts as we enter the atmosphere. We're getting static. This is in the 2000s. And my young brain thinks we can't get a camera feed in the atmosphere in 2000 whatever, but we could get it in 1960. I don't for a second buy it. I think we've probably been there since. I think we've definitely sent different tools there, but we were not on the moon when we said we were on the moon.
possible. I hear compelling arguments on both sides, and I'll be honest with
Yeah,
you, I just don't have an opinion on it. It just
that's
cracks me up. I will say this, the dumbest question anyone's ever asked me about the moon landing, and he's a good friend of mine, I love him, but he looked at me and he said, "What does it matter?"
yeah.
And I go, "What does it matter if we didn't go? It means we've been lied to for all these years. It means we've been completely hoodwinked. It matters very much if we did not go."
Well, but what we're seeing with our political climate these days is that we've been consistently lied to for all these years. Consistently. Big things, little things, if they can make it up and feed you a line of bullshit that you'll eat right up, they're going to. And that's what's so weird about this time. Is, you have all these talks of Project Bluebeam and the Project 25 and people are going back and looking at like the alien files and like Roswell, and we're like, well, maybe there's more to this story.
Oh, listen, Lewis Black has the best bit on this when he talks about when we went to Iraq and then we admitted we couldn't find weapons of mass destruction. He goes, "Well, you lied to get there. And then you
Yeah,
got there and you stopped lying. I'm comfortable with my government lying to me. Lie to me, but don't stop lying all of a sudden." But the joke of it is that the government lies to us.
yeah. And I mean, nobody was more in tune with that than George Carlin.
Oh my God. The greatest.
George Carlin's a guy who, oh, this is the craziest. There was a special that got canceled because it came out during 9/11.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And do you know what the joke was?
Any other day you asked me, I would have been able to tell you, but it's slipping my mind right now.
So I was just trying to give you an opportunity to talk because I've been long-winded, Taylor. I'm sorry.
I love you, buddy. Talk as much as you want.
So George Carlin in this special that he did said, "People in America will tell you that they don't want to see violence. Bullshit. When a bus crashes, I want 24 people dead. I want to see jets flying into planes. I want more death."
Yeah.
And then 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Do you know what released on 9/11 that they had to hold the publication? The Onion.
What?
The Onion publication was supposed to release that day, and then they had to end up holding it because it's just a form of comedy. You've ever seen their parody work?
I'm familiar with The Onion. I didn't know that they came out
On 9/11/2001.
Wow. I know
George,
you don't want to. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm just Carlin is the kind of comedian where, as a believer, even I feel bad laughing at his jokes. Like, he is so spot on with his analysis of society every time that even he makes you question what you think, which is the most important thing in this world.
And he did it in a way that made people laugh, but he also wasn't speaking down to people. Well, later on he would speak down to people.
Yeah, he was.
I don't think that was always the case, though. I think that at the end where he thought like these people are like a detriment to society, I think that's where he started punching down. But it wasn't all like, let's not forget, this is the same man that was the narrator in Thomas the Tank Engine.
Listen, I love everything he ever did except one thing.
Thomas the Tank Engine?
No. He has a bit called Guys Named Todd. And it's hilarious. But in it, he put Taylor, Dillan, Cody, Tucker, and I happen to like guys named Cody, and he has the last name Tucker. I like Dillan Weldon, Dillan Holliday, and he putting my name in there is pussy boy names.
Well,
that's
Taylor,
the only one I have that rubs me the wrong way.
Not for nothing. Me, you, and Cody aren't exactly out here on the tarmac, Weldon's the only one of us that was out there, putting in the grease,
Oh, I don't know. I don't know much about Cody's background. He might have been.
But yeah, Weldon was out here building houses and knocking tin. I wouldn't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
I know I'm learning that you're not a Stern guy.
No, I like Stern. I just think that he did a lot of shit and exploited a lot of people. There was a woman that killed herself that was on his show.
Happened all the time. I mean, a lot of shit. He did bad things. But I think he also saved lives. As crazy as that sounds.
Okay, so who's Beetlejuice? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Beetlejuice goes on to Howard Stern because Howard Stern thinks that he's a great guy, wants to go to lunch with him, wants to develop a friendship with him, or he just wants to exploit somebody's retarded nature.
I think, look, that's a hard thing because I think that
It's really not.
But the thing is, everybody's a character. So there might be Howard Stern the person, and then there's Howard Stern the character that knows what gets views. Beetlejuice gets views, right? Like, on air, yes. Or are you taking advantage of someone 100%? And that is wrong. But off air, I know for a fact Howard Stern made sure they got paid.
Well, I've heard that he wasn't necessarily the most generous person with some of his staff.
I've heard that with the staff there were issues, but I've heard too, like, look at Jeff the Drunk. Jeff the Drunk Kuro is a man who, like, that he created his own misery. It's not the same thing as Beetlejuice.
I get it, but I'm just saying that there is an exploitive nature to views.
But that's, I don't know. I guess the way I look at it is that's how it is with anything. Like, you know, we tell stories sometimes where they're exploitative. I mean, I recorded a video today about Johnny Cash getting robbed on Christmas Day in Jamaica.
And you think that that's anywhere in the same ballpark as exploiting a guy like Beetlejuice with Down syndrome, essentially?
They held a gun to Johnny Cash's 11-year-old kid at the time.
Oh,
so I think, is it the same level? No, but it's still exploitative.
I wouldn't. I don't agree.
And listen, I appreciate, you know, but the point that I was trying to make there is Howard Stern did, on 9/11, he stayed on the air.
Yeah, I know. I've listened to it.
And it's like, you wouldn't expect Howard Stern to be insightful. But that particular time, it just seemed like, you know what? He could have left. He was in a skyscraper in New York City. He could have left. Now, they did dog somebody on air who did leave. Casey Armstrong left because he wasn't comfortable being in a skyscraper in New York when towers were falling. And they later made fun of that guy. But I guess I see the good and the bad. I've seen both sides.
I get it. I will say that I've watched everything from 9/11 and listened to everything from 9/11 that I think is humanly possible. There might be some stuff out there. They were cracking some inappropriate jokes in the early hours after.
Yeah.
And then I do think they had a moment where they kind of got serious, but it's not as heartwarming as you make it sound.
I understand. But I think, look, you can't always defend that. You can't always say, you know, it's a comedy show. You can't always get behind that. You can't always get behind free speech and entertainment. But,
well, I kind of am. As with my libertarian tendencies, in some aspects of my political beliefs, I have to believe in your right to say whatever you want, no matter how offensive it is to people.
And that's what I'm saying.
And you have to be open to hearing me criticize you for that. But I still want you to say whatever you want, no matter how offensive.
And that's where you and I can have a great conversation that other people might not be able to have. Right? Like, there are other people that would have just shut down this conversation, but you and I are having it. We look at it two separate ways, but we can have the conversation and understand where the other person's at.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, where we're heading right now with podcasting is, as long as it stays uncorporatized. I mean, there's a lot of advertising in it now, so it's going to have corporate influence, but the raw conversations of two people getting together, bouncing around ideas is so foreign to media these days, where it's all, you know, polished, pre-planned conversations. I just hope that the essence of what made podcasting great, you know, 10 years ago can be sustainable and it doesn't turn into shock value. Like right now, there's a guy that's coming up as a podcaster who's hilarious. Matan. Have you seen Matan's show?
I haven't.
He's so funny. He just sits in front of a white blanket and he has very funny moments with his guests, getting great guests. I hope that, but that's kind of like a new shtick. Like, have you seen where Bobby Althoff is now kind of fallen off a little bit on views?
Yeah.
Because it was a shtick. And so that's what I'm saying is it becomes a performative. Podcasting is becoming a little performative. And I hope, if you watch Weldon's Drifting Cowboy podcast, it's just a good conversation with a legendary figure in country music. I hope we don't get invaded by corporate people that have their input and say, here's what you can and can't say. I hope it stays unfiltered.
Do you think, Taylor, and this leads into that, do you think there is a difference between Taylor Swaid the person and Taylor Swaid the media personality?
No. If you've ever watched my shows, you can tell I'm pretty stupid. I'm not saying there's no way I'm putting on some kind of performance on a podcast.
But you don't think that there's a part of you where you're looking maybe into the guests that you're going to have on, and you're thinking ahead of time, I know this person knows this. Maybe I should lead some questions in that direction and maybe I can get some reels out of it.
Yes, absolutely 100%.
So I think that that's all a part of the performative nature.
Yes, but I'm not. No one's ever left my podcast and killed themselves because I put them on the spot.
No, and I'm not saying that. I'm not insinuating that. But what I'm saying is, right, so now we've established sort of the beginning and the end, right? There's a whole litmus. So do you think an advertiser is going to tell you, Taylor Swaid, Taylor, boy, we need you to dial back the questions you're asking?
No.
Having said that, when things like that happen over on Stern, where people kill themselves and real life shit ensues, there are advertisers pulling and whatnot. I assume it just depends on what you do.
Yes.
There was that thing when Rogan first went to Spotify. I forget now what the event was that transpired because there's one every day, but people called for Spotify boycotts.
Yeah.
Because Joe Rogan did something.
Yeah, it was the N-word and the COVID stuff is basically his two biggest issues that happened when he joined Spotify.
I don't know. With the COVID stuff, it's weird because people have, their opinions on COVID. Like, boy, tying things in, we talked about the documentary they did about Vince McMahon on Netflix. Stone Cold Steve Austin says he doesn't believe in CTE.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, that was a big part of it in the thing. So they do a chapter on CTE because they talk about Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit, famous professional wrestler, ended up killing his wife and young son. Mm-hmm. They dissected his brain, realized he was a CTE person. Chris Benoit has CTE. Aaron Hernandez. All these people have CTE. All this evidence of CTE being a real thing. And Chris Benoit, Stone Cold Steve Austin is asked about CTE on this documentary, and he says, I don't know. I don't think I believe in it.
I remember the part now, but what a silly thing to say.
What a silly thing to say. And it's the same thing, there were folks that were saying they didn't believe in COVID. And I understand people saying, oh, COVID wasn't as bad as maybe they thought the media was portraying it to be, because there were people living, but there were also a lot of people dying. And is it weird that Joe Rogan goes on a podcast and talks about like horse tranks or whatever? Probably not a great look, but that's the world that he's in of, fitness and trying things. And, if Joe Rogan said, the way I got these muscles is I did steroids. If he says, I didn't work out a day in my life, but I did steroids and then I started working out and got huge, which isn't the truth, there would be a lot of people that would go out tomorrow and do steroids.
Mm-hmm.
An illegal substance. I think it's just people in that world have so much influence. I mean, how many folks do you think Look at Joey Diaz. Joey Diaz had a co-host that when they started had never done drugs. Now that guy looks like his eyes are constantly glassy. You know what I'm saying, Taylor?
Joey Diaz is hilarious.
He is. There's a world of influence these guys have.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it. There is some responsibility that comes with influence, but there's also some responsibility that comes with the First Amendment that people get to say what they want to say.
Within reason, though. You know, there are certain, you can't threaten anybody, you can't incite, acts of violence or anything like that.
Right. But I mean, what happens on Rogan where he's ever put people's lives in danger?
Precisely. I mean, I don't think. I mean, you could make the argument that like some of the stuff that he endorses are not necessarily great for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people should be snorting smelling salts for funsies. But I'm not a doctor. I don't know like what the harm is in doing that.
They're not snorting smelling salts. They're sniffing them.
Huffing. Listen, I don't know.
What are your predictions for country music in 2025?
Ooh. I think that we're going to see a resurgence of some classic artist. Maybe it'll be Lori Morgan, maybe it'll be Brad Paisley, maybe, one of those sort of people. I think we're going to see a lot more chart toppers. I think we're going to see a lot more genre bending. And I would love to see, and I've been saying this for years, I would love to see someone do If I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool, but flip the George Jones part with Barbara Mandrell, who's obviously still alive but retired largely. I would love for someone to do I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool with Barbara.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I wonder who would be a good fit for that.
Zach Top.
I was about to say, probably Zach.
Zach Top would be the one to do. Or, you could have Lainey do it, or,
Well, Lainey
Ella
just did
Langley.
that song that's kind of a version of When Country Wasn't Cool.
Yeah.
Country's Cool Again is what it's called, I think.
Yeah. Which is a good tie-in, But I'd like to see that, but that's probably just me. Really quick, at the end of here, too, I do want to just say, Dylan Weldon's, podcast is the Drifting Cowboy Podcast. You also can see some great interviews over there. T. Graham Brown was interviewed recently. T.G. Shepard, he and I both got to interview Bobby Braddock a while back. That was great. So that's the Drifting Cowboy Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, he just recently launched his YouTube channel, just Dylan Weldon, over there on YouTube. We appreciate y'all so much.
Yeah. Anyone that wants some great content, you have to go subscribe to Dylan Weldon on YouTube, Instagram, all over all the sites, because God, that guy's good.
Weldon's the best at it. He's the best of us. And, I'm so fortunate that he's someone that's in my corner. And you as well, Taylor.
Yeah, man, I love you, brother.
Your friendship, I love you too, buddy. Your friendship means much to me. I hope I didn't piss you off too much on this program.
No, brother. This is the longest podcast I've ever done, 224, and now that I'm doing more remote, I'm going to have you on for a 5-hour episode one time.
I'm sure we will.
I can't wait to give Weldon his Christmas gift. You've seen it.
Yeah. I appreciate you so much, and Weldon and all y'all. So thank you guys, and have a happy holiday, and Merry Christmas. Be well.
All right, y'all. Thanks for watching the podcast. Bye, y'all.